The following program is an original production of WICC PBS Chicago.
Tonight, 55 colleges, including 2 in Illinois, are under fire for mishandling cases of sexual assault on campus. How will the federal investigation impact these schools?
One man's junk is another's job. See how one local group is putting people to work in the deconstruction business.
And multiple investigations into Governor Quinn's $55 million anti-violence program. What will this mean on Election Day? All of these stories and more on tonight's In the Loop. Good evening, I'm Barbara Pinto.
And I'm Chris Bury. Tonight, a closer look at the problem of sexual assaults on college campuses.
55 colleges nationwide, including Harvard, Princeton, the University of Chicago, and Knox College here in Illinois, are currently under federal investigation for mishandling sexual assault and harassment.
News of the investigations came just 2 days after the White House issued a report aimed at preventing sexual assaults on campuses nationwide.
According to the Department of Justice, 1 out of every 5 women is assaulted during their college years. We spoke with 2 Chicago area women who shed light on the difficulties victims face. For months, 21-year-old Olivia Ortiz felt trapped in an abusive relationship with a fellow student.
He would force me to perform sexual acts on him, and he would forcibly perform sexual acts on me without my consent.
Olivia went to the University of Chicago Sexual Assault Dean on Call for help. She was given information about various resources in Chicago and then referred to the Dean of Students.
She had kind of dissuaded me from seeking any disciplinary proceedings because she thought that would be too hard on me, and she kind of presented it as an arduous task.
Instead, the dean set up an informal mediation session between Olivia and her former boyfriend.
It was not a pleasant experience at all. It was a really humiliating and terrifying experience to be put into a room with your assailant.
Beyond a verbal scolding by the dean, there was no investigation, no charges ever filed. The very next day, Olivia's alleged attacker was allowed to graduate. That's when she took matters into her own hands. She filed a Title IX complaint against the university last February. That complaint prompted the U.S. Department of Education's Office of Civil Rights to add University of Chicago to the list of 55 schools now under federal investigation. The university would only issue a written statement saying the university has made every effort to comply with the spirit and the letter of this inquiry.
It's happening on college campuses, at bars, at parties.
The president and a host of celebrities are featured in a new public service announcement aimed at raising awareness about sexual assault, especially on college campuses. A new White House task force is also promising more transparency when it comes to attacks on campus and more help. A new website, notalone.gov, provides resources and legal information for victims. Meanwhile, federal investigators are visiting all 55 campuses in question.
The goal of the federal investigation and the goal of the Office of Civil Rights is not to punish, but to remedy and to instruct a college or university how they can better respond to sexual assault, how can they improve.
Under new federal standards, university panels made up of students and faculty need only to show a preponderance of evidence in sexual assault cases to find an alleged attacker guilty. That means they only need 51% of the panel to agree that a sexual assault took place. Civil libertarians argue this policy tramples due process and the rights of the accused. Meanwhile, the executive director of Chicago-based Rape Victim Advocates says colleges have been inconsistent in dealing with sexual assault and harassment.
There really should be a expectation that any student can have and any parent of a student can have going to college around what that college's commitment is around the issue of sexual violence, and we don't have that currently.
Sharmali Majumdar believes the federal investigation will put colleges on notice that they need to do a better job of responding to sexual violence. 32-year-old Michelle Cahill is a survivor of sexual assault. She was just 21 years old at the time of the attack. Today, she's a student at DePaul University and works as a volunteer helping other victims.
Survivors don't hear enough that they're precious, that they're beautiful, and that they are not dirty or destroyed because of this experience.
Cahill, who came forward with her story just 5 years ago, writes extensively on the subject of sexual violence and says what survivors need most is understanding and someone who will listen.
Someone will tell me that something I've said helped them. And at the end of the day, that makes it worthwhile.
Today, we're joined by Christina Egan, attorney and partner at McGuire Woods LLP. Christina, hello and welcome.
Thank you.
This is such a sensitive issue, and it often takes women days, weeks, months, even years to come forward. When they do, why aren't these alleged crimes not reported to police?
Well, it's the victim's choice whether to report it to police. And if they choose to come forward to the school, the victim has a choice as to whether to ask for confidential treatment. The guidance issued by the Department of Education, Office of Civil Rights, mandates that schools need to be mindful of what the victim wants to have happen in terms of confidential treatment. So while the school can certainly let the victim know that there are other avenues, that they can go to local law enforcement as well and apprise them of this, they are frankly mandated by OCR to address the confidentiality request, and any steps that they take, be mindful of that request.
We've heard a lot about colleges mishandling these complaints. Talk about how they're handled. Who makes the decisions? Who investigates this if the cases aren't turned over to police?
Sure. Well, that's a very thorny area that schools are facing, quite frankly, because although there has been guidance that's been issued back in 2001 and again in 2011, and then the most recently 52-point clarification question and answer issued by OCR, there's a lot of gray area, and there's a lot of room for schools to decide how an allegation is investigated, how it is adjudicated, and frankly, there is really an absence of practical step-by-step approach that's been issued by the federal government to date in that. So there's a lot of room. Problems that are faced by schools in other areas, like for example cheating, there are certain disciplinary procedures and adjudication procedures in place, but those may not be the best types of procedures, and often are not, for incidents like sexual assault.
So basically, from what we understand, there is a panel of faculty and students who don't get a whole lot of training who make decisions on these cases. When you're talking about a sensitive issue that involves acquaintances or an ex-boyfriend, alcohol, how can we rely on these people to make smart and good decisions in these cases? Absolutely, and that's a very challenging area, and you've really hit the nail on the head. You've got, and really there's no, there are no set parameters for how the hearing's conducted or who needs to be on that hearing board and what procedures are going to take place. So there are challenges because you do have faculty members who are not trained in these areas, and it can present a lot of issues, and schools are really wrestling with this in terms of how to best, how to investigate, how to adjudicate, and that continues to be a problem that they face. This seems like such a minefield. There's also the problem of bad publicity for the schools. Sure, and that's, no school wants to be known as a school that has a sexual assault problem, and schools continue to work and to struggle in some instances with implementing the policies that they need to implement under the guidance of OCR and making sure that those policies are carried forward, but they continue to face challenges in that area. How significant was it to release the names of these 55 schools, and why now? Well, the federal government has made clear that it is making a move towards transparency. That was very evident in the White House report. They have said that they're committed to making the whole process more transparent, and as part of that, releasing information. So the release of the 55 schools currently under investigation was just one of the things that they're doing in that direction. And that is significant for schools because schools, certainly want to
be viewed as a safe place for parents to send their children. And so having the names released as one of the schools that's currently under investigation, it is significant.
Now, what's at stake for schools that don't comply?
Well, the steps that the federal government can take range, and the most serious can be the loss of federal funding, which is certainly significant for any school.
When you look at what the White House has proposed, how much faith do you have that this will make a significant difference in the way this is handled on campuses nationwide?
Well, the fact of the matter is the federal government has signaled we are looking at this issue and we are putting time and energy and resources into addressing the issue, evaluating the issue, and frankly, putting resources into taking a closer look at what schools are doing or aren't doing. So this is really significant for schools, and their schools are recognizing that we then need to put time and energy and resources into evaluating what policies we have, whether those policies need to be changed, and whether we're effectively implementing those policies.
If you could implement one or two things, what should universities be doing differently?
Well, universities really need to take a look at what they've got in terms of letting students know how if they have been the victim of sexual assault, what they can do, what steps they can take. And then the schools, they need to make sure that their policies provide for them to respond promptly and effectively, which is what's required by OCR.
All right, thank you very much for walking us through a very thorny topic and a thorny policy too.
Thank you.
Christine Egan, we appreciate your time.